Random battles as your characters explore dungeons or make their way across the world map are a staple of the JRPG genre. However, in a lot of games, especially older ones, encounters aren't random at all, and speedrunners can manipulate these in ways to their advantage. If you've ever seen a speedrunner do something like this,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 21.
or something like this, there are reasons for it. It's commonly referred to as a step count or step route. Plenty of Final Fantasy speedruns feature a step route, but in this video I'll be using Final Fantasy 7 and 8 as examples. In short, a step route is a series of planned encounters or movement setups that ensure the speedrun contains the fewest encounters possible, or ensures that particular encounters will occur during the run. Starting with Final Fantasy VIII, the way that the game decides when you'll get an encounter and what that encounter is based on a few values that are tied to the player's movement, and will always start at 0 when the game first boots up. So runners will fully shut down the game and start it up again to ensure those values are consistent at the start of attempts. I'll keep the explanations relatively jargon free, but as your character moves around, this value labelled fraction increases. Every time that your fraction value hits 255, it will reset to 0, adding 1 to this value labelled step ID, and a certain amount to this value labelled danger, depending on if you're running or walking and what screen you're on. Step ID is used to help determine what the encounter is, and the danger value is used to determine when the encounter is. Using walking steps will reduce how much your danger value increases by, and can effectively be used to sneak under the danger value of a screen where running would otherwise trigger an encounter. Take this screen in the third Laguna Dream as an example. The step route has the runner get this encounter on a long pathway screen about halfway to the dialogue section. If you continue running, you'll get a second encounter on the screen. However, by taking 10 walking steps after the screen fade is complete, the player can avoid this encounter. Unfortunately, your movement while walking is so slow that sometimes when an encounter can be avoided by walking, too many steps are required to do so, and it's genuinely quicker to just take the encounter. The reason I specify after the fade in is because during that fade in from exiting a battle or a menu or entering an area, you can see that the party is still moving. This is because your fraction won't actually increase during the screen fade. So if you see a runner open and close their menu without doing anything, it's probably intentional, as it creates more screen fades. This can also be used to correct some movement errors and get back on track, as it effectively pushes your next encounter further back. Unfortunately, there are no known ways that runners can manipulate things like the starting position of their ATB bars, preemptive or back attacks, or what the enemies will actually do in battle. Overworld encounters also can't be manipulated and are purely up to chance. Paths like this are safe zones, but runners will typically get 1 to 4 unwanted overworld encounters. As of today, there are no human viable skips that bypass areas where you can get encounters, so movement in general is pretty solved. There was a small optimization found by Pingval and recently perfected by Awesome Waves in the third Laguna Dream sequence and prison section. Using that same encounter as before, rather than taking your 10 walking steps in a row, you place them very precisely during your following movement. Doing it in this way cuts an encounter in the later prison section. And that's probably what the step route optimization will look like for the foreseeable future of Final Fantasy VIII, especially on the PlayStation version. Over on the PC side, Awesome Waves also developed several encounter skips that take advantage of the fact that on the PC version, if an encounter triggers at the same time as a screen transition, the game will prioritize the screen transition, and you skip the encounter entirely. This can be used to skip 3 encounters, and cuts a little over a minute, assuming your luck within those encounters isn't awful. This is all in stark contrast to its predecessor, Final Fantasy VII. With seemingly constant changes to the strategies used and major sequence breaks being developed year after year, the Final Fantasy VII speedrun demands constant adaptation from high-level runners, and in one of those aspects is the step route. The step route system is similar enough to Final Fantasy VIII, however menu buffers can't be used to push back encounters. Your fraction will still increase during these fades. However, if you open the menu on the same frame as a battle is set to trigger, you'll skip it entirely, so you'll often find runners menu buffering over some encounters. Fortunately, if you do make some movement mistakes, the current strategies contain several instances of forced encounters where you have a lot of extra movement. You can use this to catch up on some mistakes. It's also unfortunately not viable to collect the no encounter materia in any percent runs, whereas in Final Fantasy VIII, Diablos can learn the no encounter ability about halfway through Disc 2. This means that while Final Fantasy VIII runners only need to maintain their step route for about 4 to 5 hours, Final Fantasy VII runners need to stay on steps for basically the whole thing. Interestingly, while Final Fantasy VII's step route is mostly the same, it's more robust and contains additional values that determine enemy patterns, preemptive attacks, back attacks, and pincers, which are also tied to the player's movement. Runners have found specific movement setups that will manipulate these values to gain a back attack against certain bosses. For example, this movement in the initial reactor dungeon, as well as the sewer, will cause a preemptive attack where the Apps boss is turned backwards. Using Cloud's Braver limit against the back-turned Apps will deal massive damage and can make this fight significantly faster. There's only one other boss where this can be done, unfortunately. There's a different system that determines overworld encounters, but they can be influenced by the player. By entering the overworld with a specific in-game time, runners can make movements based on that time, and get to their destination with minimal or no unwanted encounters. The main thing speedrunners want to avoid though is pincer attacks. These battles place enemies on either side of the party and prevent them from escaping until some of the enemies have been defeated. It's important not only for speed, but the survival of the run to avoid pincer attacks. Step routes and encounter manipulations are a part of the speedrun that, while crucial to the strategies used, are very easy to take for granted. Step route and sequence break specialists will put hours into their routes and make sure that they have the fewest and fastest encounters possible. Next time you're watching a Final Fantasy or other JRPG speedrun, pay attention to the way the runner is moving their characters in dungeons in the overworld. There's a deceptive amount of intention and depth to the way that they're moving their character. If you want a better overview of the Final Fantasy VII run in general, my friend Saiyans recently made a fantastic video that I'll link in the description. And if you want to know more about the Final Fantasy VIII speedrun, it's currently my primary focus over on Twitch, which I'll also link in the description. Thanks for watching.